uh, with Umair and myself. So Umair is one of the brains behind Fasset, along with the likes of Rafi and Daniel and Saad. And those, I'm sure many of you would have heard these names and seen them. I would definitely recommend to everybody to follow them on LinkedIn and other platforms and follow Facet. There's some amazing things happening in 2025, which I can't reveal just yet, but if you do follow online, you'll be definitely in the loop with the announcements we'll be making very soon, and the kind of like, I think, uh, interesting, very interesting changes in the Islamic finance ecosystem that you'll be seeing with Fasset bringing multiple different products and different services, inshallah, to the market. But today's conversation is about zakat, right? Ramadan just around the corner, so it is the zakat season, and many of you have multiple questions. So I want to dive straight in to the webinar and let's talk zakat right now and A to Z. My plan is to, for the first 30 minutes or so, go through this presentation with you all, and then in the last half an hour, we'll have a discussion on different questions that are raised, and we'll go through multiple questions you've already submitted. And hopefully, if we get time, we'll take your questions as well towards the end from the floor. So, look, first thing, what is zakat all about? There's multiple things on your screen, but zakat is really a unique pillar of Islam. That's the truth because it's an economic, it's not only a spiritual thing, it's an economic tool. There are some estimates that the global zakat pool are anywhere between 300 billion to 600 billion USD. And that's a conservative figure. There are some estimates which say up to 1 trillion US dollars per annum. So if zakat was being paid properly and we all paid zakat, imagine the change that we'd see across the world. This is an annual spend. It's a recurring revenue that's going to be coming in. So it's a huge, huge force of change and a economic tool to really transform the lives of people in multiple ways. And its beauty is that it's not only an economic tool and has real change in the world, but on the other side, when we do pay zakah, it's actually part of our faith. We're being rewarded, we're being blessed. When you pay zakat, Allah will give you barakah. There's in the Quran, zakat and riba are contrasted together. Riba is interest that we all know, and zakah is this payment. Allah tells us that يَمْحَقُ اللَّهُ الرِّبَى وَيُرْبِي الصَّدَقَاتِ. Allah destroys interest. So your eyes are seeing in your bank balance, if you have an interest bearing account for whatever reason, your interest increases. But Allah is telling us the reality of that is decrease. Because faith is what your eyes don't see. Faith is what your eyes don't see. Faith is what's in your heart. So Allah is telling us interest really is decreasing. And how does it decrease? You don't have the protection from Allah. Your wealth is not protected. Your assets are not protected spiritually. So you're exposed. You have more risk. Whereas Allah says, وَيُرْبِ الصَّدَقَاتِ. Zakat, on the other hand, Allah increases this. So although when you pay zakat, it seems like your bank balance is decreasing and reducing, but really there'll be efficiency in your assets, there'll be growth in your assets in multiple ways, which you may not even understand. Sometimes you get a new job, you get an increase, you get somebody gives you some funds, or your assets have longevity. They're protected in different ways. So this is what zakat is truly about and the benefits of zakat. Obviously, when we're talking from a calculation perspective, it's referred to as a 2.5% on your net zakatable assets. That's the threshold or the kind of levy on assets. It's just 2.5%. And zakah is meant to be easy because zakat then comes from the profits. It's only 2.5% in reality, not more, not less. And you pay that and you're done annually. What are some of the conditions then for zakat? Who needs to pay zakat? Obviously, a person has to be Muslim. A non-Muslim is not required because this is an act of worship. The Hanafi school, as opposed to everybody else, has two additional requirements. You have to be mature. So a 5-year-old child, an infant, they may be owning gold, but they do not have to pay zakat. On the other hand, you have somebody who does not have mental capacity, they also don't need to pay zakat according to the Hanafi school. So if somebody does not have cognitive ability and functioning, they can't function well, they do not need to pay zakat. However, the other schools, so the Shafi'i school, the Maliki school, and the Hanbali school, are of the view that everybody needs to pay zakat, regardless if you're a child or if you're mature, if you have capacity, you don't have capacity. Because zakat, their reasoning is zakat is on assets itself. It's like a levy on assets. Whereas the Hanafi school says, well, it's actually worship more than anything. And just like a child, a 2-year-old child, doesn't have to perform salah and prayer, and they don't have to fast in the month of Ramadan, and they don't need to go for Hajj, then zakat being a pillar of Islam, they don't need to do that also. Right? So that's kind of like the reasoning of back and forth. So that's as far as the payer is concerned. But what about assets? Do you pay zakat on all assets? The answer is no. Zakat is only paid on specific assets. And this is also like a mercy and a beauty from an Islamic perspective that there is no zakat on your personal residence. There is no zakah on your technology that you own. There is no zakah on the car that you drive. So all your personal assets, there is no zakat whatsoever. Further, you have to own any zakatable asset. So just because you have proximity to gold or you have custodianship of gold, it doesn't mean that you as a custodian have to pay zakat. The zakah is on the owner always. He gets the upside, so he bears the downside. If you can call zakat the downside, right? He has to bear the costs of his ownership as he benefits from owning a particular asset. And that's very fair. Another condition is possession. What we mean by possession up here is the ability to transact, use, benefit from. So as long as I have this ability, I mean, I have possession, I will pay zakat. As opposed to an asset, just say I have an asset which is placed as collateral, as a pledge, as a security. I've taken on financing and I've put my gold as collateral. Now, because I can't transact in that or use that or benefit from that at all right now, it's held for the advantage of the lender. So I've been cut off from the asset. I do not need to pay zakat on it whilst it's with the lender as a collateral. Of course, if it's with me and it's like a charge, because I can still use the asset and everything, then I will still pay zakat. The third thing is zakatable assets. And this goes back to what I was mentioning earlier that you don't need to pay zakat on anything but assets, specific assets, which are deemed to be zakatable. What are they? We'll go through this shortly, but it's gold, silver, cash, your business stock, goods are for sale, and receivables, because that's also the same as cash. There are other assets like agricultural produce, animals, but because most of the people I assume don't have farms here, although it'd be a cool asset class to have, and perhaps one day Fasset will be tokenizing these types of asset classes, which will be very interesting and really give like diversification. Because like in England, who owns a farm, right? Or in Dubai, right? So it'll be a nice asset class to tap into, a very traditional asset class. But as for now, we're just talking about cash, gold, silver, uh, business stock, receivables, and then investments in zakatable assets. That's we need to understand that further, and we'll discuss that as we go along. The next kind of condition which is important to just touch upon is the word nisab. Nisab is an Arabic word which just means threshold. So it means every year there's a particular threshold. How is that threshold set? In some countries they use a gold threshold. In other countries they use a silver threshold. These thresholds were set in the hadith by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's 200 dirhams or 20 dinar. Dirhams and dinar of that time, not the current UAE, the dirhams in the UAE, but the dirhams in the time of the Messenger of Allah, which were made of silver. And that is approximately in pounds right now. It's about 400-500 pounds in silver, and almost 6,000 pounds in gold. So that's what we're looking at in terms of this threshold. Now, if a person has zakatable assets equivalent to this threshold, just say we take the silver threshold, just say it's 500 pounds for argument's sake, then you make a note of that date. whichever date in the year it is. You'll use the lunar calendar, the Islamic calendar, and so you'll say, okay, perhaps in the first of Ramadan, I had £600. You'll wait until the year end, just like your tax year. You'll wait until the year end. That's the following year on the first of Ramadan. And if you have now zakatable assets equal to or more than the threshold of this date, you will pay zakat, 2.5%. If you don't pay zakat. That's all. And that's how it works as a cycle every single year. Nowadays, it's so easy because we have calculators online. We have multiple websites where you can just put in your data and it works out for you everything. You don't really need to do much. Uh, and so all you do then is follow the calculation, follow the steps, the line items one by one, and you'll have these calculators online will tell you whether you need to pay zakat or not. And that's as simple as a calculation as it is, really. There's nothing more to it. But then the question is raised, what about investments and how do we understand investments? And that's really the topic. Before I jump to that, I just want to bring Umair in. Umair, any intuitive thoughts on this? Any kind of like similarities that you've seen in other
Yeah,
kind of areas?
yeah, no, fascinating. Thank you so much, Mufti Saab. No, I just think it's really, really interesting, to be honest, how there are so many parallels in the modern day economy. When you think about sort of zakat, sort of those of us living perhaps in the West are familiar with the concept of sort of capital gains tax on investments as and when they appreciate. And I think what's even more beautiful is the notion that this is sort of a redistribution. And that's what's really, really amazing about these concepts that were in essence sort of, given to us by God, thousands and thousands of years before the modern day tax system. And yet the principles are very similar, if not more grounded in equality and redistribution. So really fascinating. I also think, Mufti Saab, you mentioned, sort of zakatable assets. What was quite interesting for me, at least, is a lot of these assets are, there is a fair market value for these assets. There is a traded price. So you talked about land and say livestock, which may not have an efficient tradable market, but the instruments that I think you will talk about and that you've highlighted have a liquid tradable market. So you can really ascertain what that percentage or quantum is. So really fascinating stuff. I'll let you continue, but thank you so much for the insights and thank you for our audience that have joined and continue to listen.
Oh, and that's a brilliant point because the entire philosophy and the kind of legal underpinning for what makes an asset zakatable is this idea that you've purchased it for growth purposes. You want to realize that value. That's exactly what it is. And you said it very nicely. Otherwise, when a person buys residential property, you're not really concerned with its value in the market. You're more concerned with its use case and its utility that it provides you. How often do you value your property? Nobody does that, or unless they want to sell it. Likewise, your gadgets that you have, or anything else for that matter, nobody's really concerned with its market value. So zakatable assets are typically those assets where you acquired them for resale purposes. And so you're more concerned with this growth, with this accumulation of wealth. And therefore, zakah is only on those assets. And it's fair because you will be selling these on potentially with a markup, and your 2.5% will come from the profits anyway. Zakah is not on the capital, it's on the gain. And that's why you said it's the capital gains kind of tax. It's a very similar concept and it's beautiful, as you mentioned. This was all given to us 1,400 years ago, an entire system of how to capture in a fair way a share for everybody through gains that of blessings that Allah has given to us, really. We're benefiting and everybody else benefits, and there's no loss. So that is zakat in a nutshell. Literally, that 1, 2 minutes, you understand that, you've understood the entire zakat. But let's dive in now. Let's look at some assets. Okay, so these are the traditional zakatable assets, your cash, receivables, gold, silver, trade assets, investments in zakatable assets. This is what everybody more or less knows and are comfortable with. I love the chest of Fasset. Those coins are the beautiful. So kudos to the our team for the artwork there. Cash and current accounts. This is always zakatable. So the money that you have in your current account, your savings account, these things always zakatable. Likewise, cash you have in your wallet or wherever else you're hiding your cash, you don't need to disclose that to us right now. But wherever you keep your money, there's zakat on there. Whether it's e-money, digital money, or whether it's physical money, you'll need to pay zakat. What about savings accounts? So many of us potentially have Sharia compliant savings accounts, regardless of the structure, whether it's a wakala, where the bank is taking your money and acting as your agent and investing it. Typically, what the bank does, Islamic banks do, is on their liability side, which is where we sit as depositors, they take that and invest it on their asset side, doing their financing operations. And on whatever return they're gaining on the asset side, they'll share that return with the depositors. That's how it works, this kind of intermediary relationship that they have. So if you have a savings account with an Islamic bank, they'll be either acting as your agent and investing your monies in their home financing products or in other markets. Additionally, if it's a mudaraba, which is like a profit sharing uh, venture, then you'll do a profit share with the bank. So the bank will invest again in different low risk investments, and the return will be distributed between yourselves, the depositors, and the bank. So, because of this structure, the idea is always to make these monies and these deposits grow in value. They're being invested in zakatable assets, and therefore you'll be paying 2.5% on your balance of your savings account as well. Most of the time, these Islamic banks, their Sharia boards, or even the bank themselves, would release this kind of information. You can always reach out to them and ask them, what is the zakat treatment? And they'll tell you, yep, it is zakatable typically. What about precious metals and stones as an investment? So you have your gold, your silver, platinum. What is zakatable? What is not zakatable? So gold and silver, according to the Hanafi fiqh understanding, it's always zakatable, regardless whether gold is in the form of jewelry, whether it's bangles, or whether it's a actual a bar of gold or a coin. Every form of gold is zakatable, even silver. Why is that the case? It's because gold and silver have unique properties. If you look at the periodic table, gold has properties which no other metal has. It's naturally been designed to function as a medium of exchange. It has this quality. Till this day, gold is a safe haven asset. It has this thing about it. So it's as far as the fiqh is concerned, the fiqh and Sharia sees gold as a valid, permanent medium of exchange. That's why it's embedded within gold, similar to silver. The other schools of fiqh, they say, well, fine, only that gold which is treated as money and as investments is zakatable, but precious metals or gold which is like jewelry or in the form of bangles, necklaces, and so on and so forth, there is no zakat on this. And that's the majority opinion according to everybody else. So if a woman has jewelry, bangles, and these things in the form of gold or silver, they'll say there is no zakatable. That's not zakatable. It's purely like your personal clothing. That's all it is. So there's that difference of opinion. What about other precious metals and stones? So you may have platinum. You may be owning a diamond. Is there zakat on that? As long as you're not trading in these metals or these stones, there is no zakat. It's as simple as that. Yeah, if you have a diamond store, you buy and sell diamonds, then because now it becomes trade stock and a business inventory and asset, there will be zakat on it. Otherwise, there's nothing special then about a diamond. Yeah, it's a precious stone. It's a good to have, nice to have, but it doesn't make it zakatable. Okay. What about real estate and land then? So as we mentioned, your residential property, there is no zakat. Personal land is also not zakatable. Rental property, you have a portfolio of rental properties because the asset is being held for its use. There is no zakat on the property itself. You're not trading the asset. The lease and the rental income, because it's in the form of cash, it will be zakatable. Do you have to pay zakat on your income across the year? The answer is no. Zakat is like a balance sheet, like a snapshot calculation. It's like a balance sheet calculation. So whatever you have on the specific date of your zakat year end, like the first of Ramadan we spoke about, whatever you own at that particular moment, you'll pay zakat. It's not about how much you've earned. It's not like an income tax where you pay across what you've earned across the year. If you spend the money, you no longer own that money, and therefore there's no zakat on that money. It's a very beautiful way, very easy way to, in terms of payment is concerned. And then if you're trading in property or land, maybe you're flipping properties, you buy, refurbish, and sell. Your intention is very clear that you're trading properties, then in that instance, there will be zakat on the property because your concern is growth. Your concern is the market value. You want to realize gain on the asset, and therefore these assets will be zakatable. It's very straightforward as far as real estate and land is concerned. I'm sure many of us, this could be applicable to many of us in this current room. Stocks and shares. This is now getting a bit more potentially not complicated, but just more, just need to understand this well. Similar principle and logic. If you're trading stocks and shares, it becomes like a business, a business as far as Sharia is concerned. So a person has a portfolio and he's trading. He's only trying to capture the capital gain. He's concerned with capital appreciation, capital gain. You will treat this as a business asset and pay zakat 2.5% on your portfolio. However, if a person is not interested in capital gain, he's holding a portfolio for the long term as a diversification of his wealth. He doesn't want to keep his wealth in the form of cash. He wants to diversify his portfolio. And so he buys some shares, he buys land, he buys real estate, and other things. Then zakah is not on the entire value of the shares because he's not concerned with realizing capital gain right now. Perhaps he's concerned with dividend income or just diversifying his portfolio. Then, how does that work? In this instance, you would need to pay zakat according to the net zakatable assets in a company. Now, that might sound a bit difficult and challenging. So, a person typically what they ought to do is go through the balance sheet of a company and see what is the proportion of zakatable assets in the company. So, a company would have on their balance sheet fixed assets, current assets, it might have property, PPE, property, plant, equipment, goodwill, some intangibles, rights, and then it'll have cash, it'll have receivables, it'll have inventory. It's those assets which are zakatable. You can deduct the current liabilities because liabilities can be deducted. And then you work out your net position and pay 2.5% on that. So whatever the net zakatable assets are in relation to the company, the ratio of that you apply to your shares and you apply then 2.5% on your assets. Now, that can be very difficult for many people. So, what I did perhaps about nearly 8, 9 years ago, I looked at the FTSE 100 and went through the top 100 companies in the UK. Went through all their balance sheets, and this was all manual without AI. Before all your AI and ChatGPT came around, I literally sat down with every single balance sheet of every single company. It took me 4 months, but at the end of that survey, I came up with a proxy of 25% because majority of the companies, their net zakatable assets were below 25%. And so I generally tell people this proxy, I have confidence in this proxy that it'll probably be the same right now as well, very similar. Somebody else did a survey, it was like 20% recently. So if you can't do the technical analysis on the balance sheet, you take 25%, hopefully it'll do the job. But nowadays, you can always throw in a balance sheet into your AI friends and agents, and they will do all the hard work for you. No, nobody needs to do any hard work anymore, right, Umair? That's the name of the game now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just impressed with your understanding of financial statements, in addition to your understanding of Islamic finance. As an ex-analyst, I'm just appreciating your walkthrough of the balance sheet.
Alhamdulillah. Good, good. Right. So what about sukuk then? So sukuk is another asset class. What are sukuk? Sukuk are capital market instruments where uh, sovereign governments, corporates, they come and raise large amounts of funds to finance huge projects. And then these are tradable in a secondary market typically. So there's different types of sukuk. The zakat treatment of sukuk depends on the type of sukuk that you have. Sukuk ijara, where it's a sukuk, which is leasing, where you have perhaps property which has been securitized and you own a share in an SPV which owns the asset and you're earning a rental income. There is no zakat again on the asset because it's on lease, as we discussed earlier, but you do pay zakat on the income that you have and in your ownership on your zakat anniversary date. Musharaka and Mudaraba, the last one, they work very similar. It's more like a business type sukuk where you have a beneficial interest and ownership in an underlying business activity. You'll pay zakat according to your the net zakatable assets in that particular investment. When it comes to sukuk, I always tell people, look, every sukuk must be Sharia certified for it to be listed. The Sharia board will typically advise, and they should advise on the zakat treatment of sukuk. That what is the zakat treatment? So when if you hold sukuk, you can always reach out to the company, the issuer, or the Sharia board and say, look, I hold this as an investment. What is the zakat treatment of this? What's the percentage of zakatable assets in a sukuk musharaka or sukuk mudaraba? And they will disclose that to you. A sukuk murabaha in between, because murabaha is this idea of buying and selling with a markup, cost plus financing, zakat will always be payable on the full value of your investment because it's about buying goods and selling them with a profit. So the entire thing is trade, and zakat will be 2.5% on sukuk murabaha. ETFs. Now this is where it gets even slightly more. So I'm building you up, and everybody's hopefully now understanding and following, and you've got the core principles. How do we apply those principles to ETFs? Now, ETFs are simply exchange traded funds. You can think they're like your mutual fund plus a share. So they're listed, right? It's just, they can be traded, as opposed to like a mutual fund where it has it's not as liquid and tradable as an ETF. So there's three things to consider in an ETF. What is your intention? Are you trading this like you are trading your shares and your stocks, where it's purely like a business? If so, zakah is always payable. I call that an active, sorry, here is an active trading strategy. If you're actively trading, where the goal and your purpose is profit, capital appreciation, gain. And that's your mindset that you've entered into this. And that's your mindset when you acquire this ETF. Then treat it as business stock and pay 2.5%. On the other hand, if your intention is, I want to diversify my holdings, my wealth, and diversify my portfolio, I'm holding ETFs just as another form of wealth. Or I'm interested in perhaps some kind of gain to say there's some kind of like income from there. I'm interested in that. I'm not interested in buying and selling the ETF right now. I'm not buying low, selling high. You're not going long. That's not the idea. You're just holding this asset right now. In that instance, again, the same thing we did with shares, where you look at the net zakatable assets, you'll do the same thing. But obviously, ETF is a basket of shares, a basket of equities. It's not as easy as one company and one balance sheet. You could be looking at 100 balance sheets. So this is where I think the proxy makes the most sense. We need a proxy. Obviously, you have AI. So if you have an ETF, you can definitely do some analysis with AI now. And that AI changes the entire zakat dynamics, to be honest, because the access to information and calculations can be expedited. So, but a proxy can still do the job. So if you have an ETF and you're saving, you're using this as a store of wealth and a diversification, or you are just holding for income, for long-term gain, perhaps as a diversification, then zakat will not be on the full um, investment value, rather just on the net zakatable assets, which can be captured through the proxy of 25%. And REITs. What are REITs? So REITs are there's different types of REITs, right? You have mortgage REITs, you have like a property REITs where it's not mortgage-backed securities, it's a proper where the trust is actually owning commercial property or residential property and there's rental income being gained. But REITs are unique kind of like asset classes with its own kind of like regulatory requirements and tax treatments. So from a Sharia perspective, when we look at REITs and from a zakat perspective, generally because this is a rental income, if you're not trading this and it's not something which you are again treating like an ETF or a stock where you're doing business, but you're just there for the rental income, zakat will not be on your capital investment. Zakat will be on your rental income that you're gaining and that is with you on your zakat anniversary. because it's like rental property. If that's your intention and your frame of mind when you purchase this REIT or this unit or this instrument, then you just pay zakat on your rental income. You don't have to worry about the full value. Yeah, if you're trading, if this is part of your strategy where you've acquired some REITs and you want to sell on with a markup, then you are really treating that as a business asset and you'll pay zakat on the entire value of that investment. So that's quite a few different asset classes, and we'll touch upon other asset classes shortly. But what about business? And I've just brought this in between because we've talked a lot about balance sheets. So this is a typical balance sheet, at least as far as assets are concerned. On a balance sheet, you'll see current assets and fixed assets. You'll see zakatable assets and non-zakatable assets. So everything on a balance sheet as far as current assets are concerned are typically zakatable. That's your bank deposits, trade receivables, loan receivables, your inventory, your stock, and then investments in zakatable assets. So in a balance sheet, you'll see joint ventures, you'll see associates, you'll see other types of like these words. They reflect the percentage of interest to ownership the company has in other companies or other investments. So there's different terms that are used. You can always look at the notes that are accompanied with a balance sheet to understand the details of any line item. The non-zakatable assets on the balance sheet, your property, plant, equipment, capital and fixed goods, your fixtures and fittings, collaterals, and intangibles. These are not zakatable. So as far as you are concerned, if you have a business, you just need to work out your the total value of these assets on the left. You can deduct any current liabilities that you have, and then the net amount you'll pay 2.5% on that. Now, digital assets. This is where something which Fasset are leading really in the world in this entire tokenization and digital assets industry. How do we deal with zakat on these things? So again, let's apply the same principle. What we've learned earlier and what we've been discussing is that it all comes down to really why are you acquiring something? That's really the underlying principle. If you are trading in digital assets, your idea is I've bought, for instance, I've bought Solana, and Solana is available on the Facet app, by the way. And the Facet app is screened for Sharia compliance also. So if you're interested in Sharia compliant digital assets trading, Facet app is the place to be. Nothing comes on the app without a full Sharia review. And we're very firm on that. That's our kind of like a motto when it comes to listing assets on the app. So if you are trading Solana, and Solana is not really it's not like Bitcoin. It wasn't designed to function as a medium of exchange, it was as a payment system. And you have Solana because you just want to diversify your wealth, or perhaps you want to use Solana. You want to use a network, you want to use a token, then there's no zakat due on that. However, if you have Solana with the pure intention, I want to make a gain on this, I'm buying this to sell high, then it'll become a trading asset. It'll become a business stock. It'll become like inventory, and there will be zakat. So, in any digital asset, we need to see first your strategy. What's your strategy when it comes to investing? And secondly, if your strategy is I am trading, it's always zakatable. If it's not trading, then it really depends on the type of uh, digital asset that we are referring to and discussing. There are some digital assets like Bitcoin, for instance, which is always zakatable. If something is designed to function as a medium of exchange and as a payment system, then it will always be zakatable because it's also in the ruling of money. And so it should be treated like money for zakat purposes. But if it's not the case, then there will be no zakat on it, like your Solana and these things. Private equity Private equity is was something which Umair was has great experience and expertise in, and so this will be very like straightforward for Umair. But it's more challenging than listed equity because you can get access to financials and you have visibility on a number of things when it comes to something being listed. When it's private equity, the visibility, the liquidity is not always there, so it makes it more challenging. But very simply, we're going to apply the same analysis. You're a shareholder now. You're a shareholder. You will pay zakat on the net zakatable assets in the company. That's all you're concerned with. So in this example, You have a company with a book valuation of 10 million pounds. Argument's sake, the net zakatable assets are 5 million. That means 50% of the assets are net zakatable assets. And that's how much is considered for zakatable purposes. Now, what do you do next? If I've invested 1 million in the company, 50% of the investment is subject to zakat. So you have 1 million times 50%, that's £500,000, and 2.5% of that then becomes a zakat. So how much is that? Is £12,500. That's all. Sounds very simple. The challenge is getting the information and data. That's where the challenge is. Reaching out to the founders and the team to get that data. It is possible to have like a valuation reports, and these things are shared, but it's not as easy as just going Googling something. You'd have to get in touch with the firm or the company or the fund. If it's a fund of funds or something, you just need to get in touch with the fund to deal with. The last couple of asset classes, your collectibles art, are the same. And this is a pretty cool picture as an art picture. What's the zakat treatment like? We've been discussing before. Collectibles and art, if people purchase this and acquire this just to make their wallpaper or room look nice, just as a feature on the wall, there's no zakat on that. That's your personal assets and personal property. However, if you're trading in art and collectibles, now you're more concerned with the capital gain, there will be zakat on that therefore. So art and collectibles, if you treat it as stock and trading and inventory, like everything else we've discussed, there will be zakat. If you're purchasing these to make your room look good, there will be no zakat at all. And that brings me to an end of the presentation. I appreciate we have still about 25 minutes. So, Umair, any thoughts, anything you want to share at this moment in time?
No, I think super informative, Mufti Faraz. I just wanted to thank you, obviously, for those insights. I think there are some fundamental principles, um, which, there's obviously a lot of content, a lot of information. There's a lot of science that you shared. I think some fundamental principles will definitely stick with me. So, for example, assets that are tradable, assets that are held for growth purposes, as a general rule of thumb
Mm.
are sort of subject to tax. There's obviously lots of nuances, but I think there's some really interesting principles and key takeaways. I would also like to reiterate what you said earlier on, which is Fasset as a platform, provides a lot of these assets that have been pre-screened by Mufti Saab and his team for Sharia compliance. So if people on the call are looking for opportunities or platforms to invest in, then obviously Facet is one of those. I understand we have a number of questions, a lot of questions that are submitted, so I'd love to be able to sort of get through as many as you're comfortable with and not take up too much time. Thank you, Mufti Saab.
Okay, so let's jump into the hopefully everybody can see my screen now. So these are a number of questions we've received, right? And there's perhaps many. So let's do as many as we can. Let's fire away. So the first one we've discussed, do I pay zakat on shares held for trading only or also dividends? We've answered that. Zakat is always paid. It just depends on your intention. So if you're trading, then it's on the full value. If you're holding for dividends, it's on the net zakatable assets, as we discussed. So you work out the actual zakatable assets and pay 2.5% on that. Number two, if a stock was held for more than a year, how to determine whether it is eligible for zakat? Again, this comes down. I mean, if you've entered this with a very clear intention, you want to sell this and get capital gain, that is what's taken into consideration. I mean, if you're holding it for more than a year, then very likely you're more concerned with as a different diversifying your portfolio, and you're more concerned with the dividend income perhaps, and just as another source of wealth. You can then take the net zakatable assets method, the 25% proxy, and pay zakat accordingly. Is there a zakat difference between stocks versus dividend yielding stocks? No. It all comes down to your intention. Regardless if a stock pays dividend or doesn't pay dividend, if your intention is for trade and capital growth and appreciation, you'll treat it as a stock, trading stock. Otherwise, it's just a diversification and you pay zakat on the net zakatable assets. How is zakat calculated on a startup investment where returns are only realized upon an exit? Yeah, it's a very good question. So we spoke about private equity. It's the same concept there. You are becoming a shareholder as an angel investor, or in an early round you've invested. You're becoming a shareholder in the company. You will pay zakat according to the net zakatable assets in that company. If you don't have the capital available at the moment to pay zakat, because it might be greater than your current assets that you have with you in terms of liquid capital in cash, then you can wait until your gains are realized and pay your zakat from there for the previous years. Number 5, how should zakat be calculated on long-term crypto holdings that are not actively traded? Is it based on the market price, purchase price, or upon selling price? So this all depends on the type of crypto. If the crypto and the token is a payment system like your Bitcoin, Litecoin, Monero perhaps, these things which actually have been designed to function as a peer-to-peer payment system, we would treat that for zakat purposes as cash. That's the pure utility of that, nothing else. If it's something else, if it's a utility token, a governance token like our own, so own is something which I hope Umair will just briefly touch upon later on. But any such kind of token, whether it's utility token, governance token, or yeah, these two, there'll be no zakat on it unless you're actively trading. If it's a security token where you're securitizing real world assets, for instance, then it's all about what is the underlying asset. For instance, if you've securitized and it is tokenized gold, because gold is zakatable, the token will obviously be zakatable because the token is a reflection of ownership in the underlying gold. So you have to then consider the underlying asset. The next question is, if I have unrealized profits on crypto, do I pay zakat on them? This again depends on your intention. So what we discussed earlier, if you are trading them, then you still pay zakat. Even though it's unrealized, you have a gain, is part of your wealth. You've got access to that crypto. You can sell that crypto if you wanted to and pay your zakat from there. Alternatively, you can pay zakat from your other assets. If you're unable to do that because of the size of the holdings, perhaps you don't have the cash available in other currencies, then when you do realize the gain, you can pay your zakat for that was outstanding. How is zakat calculated on stable coins and USDT holdings? Yeah, so these again function as currencies. They're mirrors of like USD and others. You'll pay zakat on that because being a stable coin pegged to USD, it's more or less functioning as a currency. So you'd pay zakat on them, always 2.5%. Do we have to pay zakat on our pension funds that are locked until retirement? This is a very good question. So different countries have different forms of pensions. There are some forms of pensions which are not zakatable at all. Like in the UK, we have a defined benefit scheme. This is just deferred salary. That's all it is. And there is no zakat on deferred salary. There are other types of pensions which are investments, just that you are unable to access your investment, but you can choose the provider, the type of fund, you can move it around. Because of regulatory reasons, the government wants you to save this for your retirement. They don't allow you access until 55, 57, or later on. Now, there is a difference of opinion in this. And to be honest, my previous view and has typically been you do pay zakat on it, but I'm just revisiting that view right now. I just think it requires a greater discussion. So these things continuously need to be revisited and reviewed. So this is one for those kind of like later discussions. How does zakat apply to long-term investment accounts where there is no intention to sell immediately? If the long-term investment account has zakatable assets in there, cash, for instance, or you're holding something else, then it's always zakatable because the asset in the account itself is zakatable, even though you're not, exiting or whatever. If your long-term investment account is in asset classes which are not zakatable, then there would be no zakat because there's no intention to sell. Now, the question about immediately, this is a question which many people raise. Well, I've bought this, I may sell this, or in the future. That's not good enough. Like just buying something to sell one day in the future, like I've bought land, maybe when I need it, I'll liquidate it. That doesn't make something zakatable. But yeah, if you bought something with a very clear understanding that I am going to liquidate this and I am looking for the right market, the right price in the market, and I will be selling this, that's when something becomes zakatable. But when you buy something and think, when I need it, I'll liquidate. If I don't need it, I'll keep." That means from that very way we are thinking about things, it's not really a trading asset. We've kept it. Maybe in the future we'll sell when you have a necessity. Because this asset is perhaps more liquid than your other items in the house or other things, you're treating this somewhat differently, but it's not the same as stock and inventory. So you won't pay zakat on that. What about gold and silver? Is zakat applicable on gold and silver jewelry that is inherited or kept for safekeeping? If you've inherited this and you own it, there will be zakat. If you're safekeeping for other people, you don't pay zakat, but the owner pays zakat. Okay, so this perhaps applicable for many sisters who are sitting on 5 kilos, 10 kilos, 15 kilos of gold, silver. Yeah, you better safe keep that well and keep that in custody. You don't want that to get lost. But yeah, you own that, you will pay zakat. Is zakat due on gold that is worn for personal use? As I mentioned earlier, if you follow like the Hanafi fiqh understanding, then yes, zakat is due. If you follow the Maliki school, the Shafi'i school, and the Hanbali school, then zakat is not due. We've mentioned this already. We've discussed this question just above. I have some gold jewelry given to me by my mother, although it is mostly gemstones with a little gold. I do not really use it, nor have I kept it as an investment. Rather, it is kept primarily to pass on to my children for sentimental purposes. Is zakat due on the value of the gold? Yes. So even if it's 9 carats, for instance, and there's a very low volume and quantity of gold in a on an asset, you'll still need to pay zakat on that if it's able to. Are you able to determine the value of gold? So it is a gold item. You will pay zakat just on the fraction of gold, nothing else. So you will just get it valued. What's the value of gold in this particular jewelry or this item, and you'll pay zakat accordingly. So if it's worth £5,000, the gold is only £500, you'll pay 2.5% on the 500. That's all. Zakat on property and land. How is zakat on real estate shares calculated? We discussed this in the presentation. If you're trading on the full, if you are holding for real estate purpose, for dividend purpose, then it's only on the rental income and nothing else. If I purchase a plot of land for personal use, but later decide to sell it, when does it become zakatable? Very good question. It will not be zakatable. Even if you change it, this is where, Umair, this is the nuance here. So if I buy something for personal use, property, land, and I change my mind 1 year later, I want to sell. That does not make the asset zakatable. Even though now I'm selling, it'll only be zakatable at the time of acquisition and you had the intention to resell. But if I change my intention 1 year later, 2 years later, that will not make it zakatable. The only time I'll consider zakat is when I've sold the asset, I have cash. This form, cash, will be zakatable.
Fascinating. It,
It,
it it seems like there's this concept of kind of niyat and self-governance, which kind of is sort of intertwined with how you calculate what is zakatable. Fascinating.
absolutely, absolutely. So number three, if I have invested in land but there are legal disputes, do I still have to pay zakat? Well, firstly, make sure you have a good lawyer, and secondly, do you need to pay zakat? Then it all just depends on the nature of the legal disputes. If you still have ownership, your ownership is there, but maybe there's some expenses, maybe there's some kind of dispute on the who owns a particular share. Then you can perhaps hold off until that's been resolved, and then work out your zakat retrospectively on the land if you've bought that to resell as well. Remember, if it's just land that you've kept for personal use, or there's no clear intention to resell in the future, you just have this as a diversification, then there's no zakat at all. Number four, if I have two plots of land, or I have two plots of land purchased with the intention of resale in the future, do I have to pay zakat on these properties? How do I calculate the zakat amount? Yes. So if you bought this with a very clear idea that I'm selling this, remember, you have to be very clear that are you selling this? Like, is it a trade asset or you've bought this one day in the future? If you need, you'll sell. If it's that one day in the future, if I need, I'll sell and I'll liquidate. That's not zakatable. It's are you treating this as a business asset? Are you looking for capital gain? Is this listed on the markets? Are you looking for a buyer? Are you advertising? Are you concerned with its market value now? That's the conversation to have if you're trading something. So if that's the case, then you just take the market value right now and pay 2.5% on these plots of land. Sukuk, we discussed, uh, as I said, the best advice up there is always just reach out to the Sharia advisor or Sharia board who certified the Sukuk. They will give you more details on the zakat treatment. How to calculate zakat on sovereign Sukuk issued by Saudi Arabia. So Again, it depends on the type of sukuk, whether it's murabaha, wakala, musharaka, mudaraba, istisna, so on and so forth. That will determine really uh, the zakat treatment. But as I mentioned, just reach out to the Sharia board or the issuer, and they should give you some details. Is zakat 100% the face value, or semi-annual profits, or at maturity? It all depends on the underlying structure. Because if you're doing wakala or mudaraba or musharaka, there'll be different treatments. Like murabaha as well will be something different. Zakat on savings and salary. Is zakat applicable on money saved in banks, regardless of amount? Yes, typically zakat is always due on money, regardless of the amount, but you'll add that to your other assets. So only when you reach the threshold will you pay zakat on the money that you have after adding it to everything else. So if a person has nothing else and he has only £100 or 500 dirhams, then there's no zakat because it's below the threshold. So not everybody needs to pay zakat. That's the key thing. We have a system of zakat payers and zakat recipients. We help one another. And this is like sustenance and earnings from Allah. When we give zakat to somebody, we're not doing a favor to that person. Rather, that person is doing a favor to us for accepting our zakat because we're fulfilling our obligation through this person. So we should be grateful for people or to people who accept our zakat, and we shouldn't feel that we're doing them a favor because we're not. And that's very important from a mindset perspective. Do I pay zakat on my savings at the bank or any amount saved? We discussed this. Is there zakat on salary? Good question. So we mentioned earlier a principle. Zakat doesn't function like income tax. So it's not about how much you earn in the year. It's what you own on your zakat year end. So whatever you have on that amount at the end of your zakat year, whatever you own then, that's what you pay zakat on. It's not about how much you have earned across the year. I will pause here. I'm just conscious of the time. Umair, I'd love to bring you in now to perhaps with your intuition, some thoughts, and anything else you'd like to share.
No, I think this is fascinating. I mean, again, you've talked about sort of this balance sheet concept, right? So that's I think quite relevant. So all of us that are employed get a salary. I thought that was a very interesting question. I guess we just pick an arbitrary date, right? And then that becomes the date at which we calculate whether that salary is in the form of cash, and then therefore it becomes a zakatable, if
The,
I'm not.
the date, so another good question which wasn't answered or touched upon previously. The date, it all depends on the first time you have reached the threshold. Now, if you haven't done that exercise, then yeah, what you do now is just pick a date and stick with it. And that's
Got
why
it.
most people, I mean, it really how zakat is supposed to work is the first time in your life, once you're mature, the first time you have wealth equaling the threshold. Just say we went with £500 or this silver amount, that's when you should be paying zakat. You should be using that date. But what's happened here is everybody pays the zakat in Ramadan. It's not like we all became wealthy in Ramadan, but it's just that
Yes.
we've just
Yes.
used an arbitrary date, right? That's
Yes.
the reality.
Yes. Yes. No, excellent. I think some of those questions were really, really, I think, practical questions that even I had. But I think what also is amazing in Islam is that you have this concept of self-governance, right? You don't have an authority, a governmental authority per se, telling us what to do. There is this notion that God has told us what we should be doing, and then it's up to us to fulfill, which I think is just amazing when it comes to sort of this self-governance concept. And then sort of this notion of niyat, which again is also self-governance, and you know what your niyat is in terms of,
Hmm.
let's say, selling a property. So there's such a high degree of kind of accountability and sort of that we as human beings have in the practical world. Everybody's trying to escape sort of, let's say, sort of optimize their tax situations. In this case, it's amazing. Essentially, you have your own sort of governance system that dictates what should and shouldn't be zakatable. So I just find it really fascinating, and everything that you talked about, Moti Saab, was extremely insightful. So really, thank you once again.
No, great. Yeah, exactly. So zakat is this kind of like governance, kind of like we have, but it works within an ecosystem. And that's the beautiful thing. So there's an entire ecosystem, and zakat is a part of that. We have an entire end-to-end system to empower society and humans. That's why Islam is like a human development program. because it takes
Mm.
care of your economic needs, your personal social needs, your spiritual needs, every your educational needs, your cognitive needs, like every need that you have. Like is we're grateful to Allah that Allah has given us a system like this, which really empowers humanity and society. We're there to support and benefit people and bring good to people and the world. And that's why we need, as a group, we really need to push ourselves to perform at our best to be able to give the best to people. That's really the message of Islam. Be high performers so you can deliver the best to people.
Wonderful. And I think this is this specific invest and connect session is particularly relevant as we head into Ramadan. So I think, that probably is also part of the reason why we had so many questions. I do want to thank the audience for their participation. I would say that this is probably one of the most well-attended Invest and Connect sessions we've had, just judging by the sheer number of people that are on the call, but also the number of questions. We had over 100 questions that were submitted. So apologies on our behalf if we weren't able to get through all of these, but I think safe to be said, Mufti Saab, you might have to follow this up with a few more sessions because there seems to be a lot of demand. And I know you're also going to be traveling and you're going to be on the road. I'll maybe let you touch upon that as well. But before, one thing I do want to talk about is I think you talked about this sort of layer two that Facet is launching called Own. Um, for our participants, I do encourage people to look at our website. It's www.ion.xyz. We do have a layer two dedicated blockchain protocol for which there will be a token sale. So for those of us who are interested on the crypto side, please stay tuned. But I think, we're really, really fortunate to have the intellectual capital that we have in-house via Mufti Faraz Adam and his team. So once again, Mufti Saab, thank you so much. Facet is an app where we take sort of Sharia compliance very, very seriously, and we have a very defined, well-defined, and thoughtful framework. We also have some very interesting discussions on individual stocks. Mufti Saab and I and members of the team, we've talked at length about, individual securities and stocks and whether they are or are not Sharia compliant. So I think, that's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. Um, like I said, for those that are interested, particularly on the Sharia compliance side, to invest and identify assets, please do go to our Facet app. You should be able to download the app, trade Sharia compliant stocks. There's a yield product which is driven by Sukuks as well as digital assets. Facet, as you know, is licensed. We are headquartered in Dubai. We have operations and people on the ground in a number of different countries. But I do want to thank you all for your participation and Mufti Saab for his insights. And maybe Mufti Saab, I'll pass it over to you before I end in case you want to talk about your upcoming roadshow and trip and tour. But
Yeah.
thank you from my side and from the Facet and Own side.
No, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have this, and yeah, definitely we need to do this more. I think, right? There's a big demand for this, and perhaps the next session we'll just have an open Q&A. I'd love to go all out and just see how many questions we can work through. But yeah, look, those on the call, inshallah, the plan is in Ramadan. I will be coming to Jakarta, Indonesia, and go also Pakistan. We'll have a number of events in Indonesia and Pakistan talking all things zakat, digital assets, Islamic finance, investing. So any of you who are around, please feel free to drop by, and I'd love to get to know you more and discuss further. It will be perhaps from the 12th of March till the 19th of March. So perhaps 12th, 13th, 14th, I'll be in Indonesia. 15th till the 19th, perhaps I'll be in, if I remember the dates correctly, in Pakistan. So yeah, just look out, follow Facet on LinkedIn, go on Telegram. We have a Facet channel there, Facet Islamic channel, and just keep in touch.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. Assalamu alaikum, and have a pleasant evening and day.